Hi everyone, welcome back to my corner. Finally part 2 of the video. Thank you so much for the support on the first one. I'm actually really happy that a lot of people liked it and that you have enjoyed philosophy and that you found it accessible and understandable, because that's the whole point of the channel. What I'm trying to do is to kind of introduce people to different types of literary fields and genres and analyses in an accessible manner, hopefully to have them kind of understand it in a way where they don't have to go to university for it, because a lot of academia I find to be inaccessible and very exclusive. There's a lot of gatekeeping. The language is very difficult, and it's done purposely so, I feel, because they don't want people to understand it unless they come from an elite background. So I'm hoping to kind of make it more accessible on this channel. I'm not gonna go into the depth of everything, into the complexity. I'm gonna try my best to kind of rip it back and destructuralize everything, and hopefully have everyone kind of understand it in a more simple way. So in part 1, we talked about the general introduction of Dionysian and Apollonian impulse and what those two impulses entail in their inequality. What is a Dionysian aesthetic? What is an Apollonian aesthetic? How do they work with one another? Now, I promised for part 2 I will go into the details and the elements of those impulses that are used in BTS's work and their music videos. When it comes to the impulse, the Dionysian and Apollonian impulse, BTS have kind of incorporated those two things in different ways, be it visually, auditory, lyrically, in the way that they live even. There are just so many different ways that they've incorporated the Dionysian and Apollonian aesthetic or impulse, which is understandable because both kind of describe the human nature and the human identity. So at a base level, everything can kind of be ripped down and ripped apart and seen as a Dionysian Apollonian impulse. So when BTS first started, they started with No More Dream. No More Dream was their first debut track. It was their first title track. It was very aggressive, rebellious in its image, and that was kind of the concept or image that they had for the first few years of their career, which is still relevant now. It's still apparent in their career now, but at a more subtle level, in a more calm, it's more calculated, and it's more nuanced. What they were going through in the beginning was entirely different. It's kind of like a spectrum of rebellion. But to talk about music, Apollo is the god of music, and seeing as he's the god of music, people would often assume that music is an Apollonian impulse, or it falls under the Apollonian impulse. However, it does not. The only music that falls under the Apollonian impulse is usually music that is suggestive in its nature, not in a explicit or sexual way, but suggestive in the way that the tune is very subtle. It's often very dreamlike in its structure, and that's Apollonian music. Dionysian music, on the other hand, is described by Nietzsche as music that incites terror and fear into the listener. And so the essence of Dionysian music, and hence music in general, is categorized as Dionysian in nature. And Nietzsche says that it is un-Apollonian, namely in the emotional power of the tone, the uniform flow of the melody, and the harmony that excites. And as I said in the first video, the Dionysian is categorized or manifests in a group collective effort in a chorus of people. There's no individuality. And so to kind of have that sense of collective, the sense of group, like if you're at a mosh pit or a concert or a rave, that just kind of uniform flow of feeling is very much Dionysian. And so music that incites that type of feeling is Dionysian in itself. This manifests very clearly in BTS's early work, namely in No More Dream, in NO, in Fire. And those are mainly the initial tracks that I'm talking about. When No More Dream came out, there was a lot of rebellion, a lot of aggressiveness, and a lot of anger. There's rebellion and intensity in the music video, in the music. There is a constant theme of destruction, relevant and prevalent throughout the visuals. It incites this feeling of anger and rebellion in the listener. It gives off an intense feeling of wanting to be part of something bigger than yourself. And that's the essence of the Dionysian impulse. Like you're an elastic being drawn taut and eventually released. And when it comes to the wordplay, in No More Dream, dreams are an Apollonian impulse. They're an Apollonian thing. They're an Apollonian concept. So to say no more dream, there's kind of like a destructuralization and a destruction of dreams. Therefore, kind of insinuating that there is a stripping back of Apollonian ideals. So this concept progresses when No comes out, or NO. It progresses from a call of rebellion to a call of non-conformity, where they tell people to just stop conforming to the ideals of society, stop conforming to what is expected of you as a person, and instead attempt to go find your own way. However, they want this rebellion and this non-conformity to come in the form of a collective. So it's kind of like they're calling for a group of people to collectively resist, to collectively non-conform. And it's that sense of the collective, that sense of group, that is also Dionysian in its elements and Dionysian in its nature. However, I find that it's very interesting how they incorporate the Apollonian with it, specifically in No, because when you look at No, there are parts of the MV where in the background there are these structures, these amazing structures of architecture. They're so beautiful. The hands, the stairs, the plain white background, those are all Apollonian and pure in their nature, in the visual message that they relay to the viewer. And to the way that they played with both elements and had them work with one another is exactly what I have been arguing this entire time. It's basically the pinnacle of both elements and impulses working with one another dialectically. When we enter the Hwayanyonghwa trilogy, there is a more complex way of exploring those elements. What follows their initial exploration of rebellion, nonconformity, and anger is their exploration of pain, tragedy, and death, all of which were relevant themes and recurrent themes in the HYYH trilogy. Now, when I Need You came out, it garnered a lot of attention, a lot of success. It was their first win, and many people attributed that to the new style of not only the new style of music that they had, but also the dance break in the middle, which actually wasn't very relevant in the music industry at the time. It wasn't something that people did. However, they did it, and they did it successfully, and it got them their first push in a way. However, on the other hand, there's also the emotional connection that people felt to the music video that also pushed that success even further, that gave I Need You the kind of relevancy and permanence that it has until today. And that's because of how relevant the themes are. They explore youth in different ways. When you go through the music video of I Need You, there is a series of themes themes that follow one another, where they show you two sides of the spectrum, sadness and happiness. There's pain and then there's relief. And to have those two sides of the coin play with one another is an exploration of existence of tragedy and the absence of it. Now, the music for I Need You, the lyrics were very catchy. However, the story of the lyrics and the story of the video don't match one another. They're entirely different. However, they work in collaboration with one another. Now, Nietzsche wrote about this in his own book, about the relationship between the visuals and the music. And this is what he says. He says that this deep relation with which music has to the true nature of all things also explains the fact that suitable music played to any scene, action, event, or surrounding seems to disclose to us its secret meaning and appears as the most accurate and distinct commentary upon it. So despite the lyrics and the visuals not really being suitable for one another, the music in itself is very suitable for the visuals. And you notice this when you look at the parts where there is only a music break and there are no lyrics. There is a sense of melancholy and tragedy and a bittersweetness to the song when played above the visuals, or played with the visuals. That kind of dialectical relationship between the two is what Nietzsche was discussing and talking about in his thesis. Now, I Need You and Run work together, and it's very obvious that both are in the same realm or in the same time, and they use very similar scenes. So to watch them back to back, they both explore the two ends of the spectrum. While I Need You looks at the tragedy and the pain and the loss and the anger and the death that often plague the life of youth, Run explores the frenzied joy, the happiness and expression and confrontation. When these opposing images work with one another and they work in duality to each other, it reminds us of an important Dionysian aspect, which Nietzsche states and talks about. And he states that it reminds us that the curious blending of duality in the emotions of the Dionysian revelers reminds us, as medicine reminds us of deadly poisons, that of the phenomenon that pain begets joy, that ecstasy may wring sounds of agony from us. At the very climax of joy, there sounds a cry of horror or a yearning lamentation for an irretrievable loss. So the quote, which I clumsily just read, it states that to have tragedy without joy or joy without tragedy, it does not work. That they work in tandem with one another, very much like the Dionysian and Apollonian impulses. And that's exactly what's being shown to us in these videos, and their constant duality within the music videos and the music. The way each of these emotions play in a conversation with one another in a visually striking manner, it reinforces a familiarity with those watching who may suffer the same struggles and feel those emotions. And it's that kind of makes the bond even stronger. Eventually, the meeting of the Dionysian emotional roller coaster with the uniform Apollonian structure, it serves to create a more pure form of art, a true form of art that reflects the true human identity and experience. Now, with the arrival of Blood, Sweat, and Tears, personally for me, seeing this music video and listening to this song, that is for me the pinnacle of the meeting of both impulses. Because while the music, the dancing, and the choreography, they all portray this undercurrent sexual licentiousness, desire, temptation, and joy. On the other side of the coin, there is all of this amazing art and structure behind them. There are uniform structures, there's architecture, marble statues. It's very pure in its form, and that is the Apollonian. you know, marble statues, architecture, structures. Those are Apollonian forms of art, of expression. And to have that combined in the background, along with the undercurrent desire and temptation and sexual licentiousness that are prevalent throughout the video, is the pinnacle of those two impulses meeting one another. And that is why it's visually one of my favorite videos, because of how they work together. And this also applies to DNA. The same exact thing applies to DNA and Idol. They often started to have these uniform structures in the background, while the forefront incorporates all of the dancing, the colors, and beautiful lyrics that are often about celebration, about happiness, about love and emotion. And to have that contrast with the structures in the background is very captivating to the audience, because it showcases two different impulses working with one another seamlessly. Their rebellion and exploration of rebellion in time, as they have moved on with the conversation between the Apollonian and the Dionysian, it started to evolve, and it became more about the exploration of self and the rebellion against the mask that hides oneself, rather than rebellion against the outside world, rebellion against social norms, rebellion against things that are external to yourself. They have moved the conversation inwards and instead have moved the rebellion against your internal self and your internal barriers. One of those barriers that they explore is the mask, and the mask that hides oneself. Now, the mask is something that is a Dionysian aspect of aesthetics. And the idea of unmasking oneself, of unmasking your true nature, is again the way that they touch on this certain concept. And they use that conversation of the Apollonian and the Dionysian in their music videos and their music in different ways of expression in order to fuel that struggle and to fuel that rebellion against the self. But oftentimes it ends in a very cathartic release, because they blend the Dionysian elements with Apollonian structure, and eventually it all creates this very cathartic release and this celebration that often leaves you very happy and comforted by the end of it. Much like when you go to a party or a concert and watch something that just robs you of your breath, that makes you feel in awe. And that's, I think, the beauty of what art does. I'm sorry if the video is a bit more chaotic and not as structured as my last one. I wanted to lay it all on the table at once. I didn't want to go too in depth into everything, but I wanted to provide specific examples to show you how the two impulses are shown, how they work with one another, and perhaps you can do it yourself now that you've become familiar with the concept. Thank you so much again for the support last week. I will be making a lot more. Hopefully you stay. There won't be about BTS, I'm afraid, but I do have a lot to talk about. And if you're interested, stay tuned, subscribe, comment, like the video. I don't know, tell me what you think. If you like the video or not, let me know in the comments. If you have any suggestions, tell me in the comments. If you don't like the video, tell me in the comments. I'm okay with whatever feedback you have to offer. But just subscribe, press the notification bell, because I don't know how you're gonna know if I post it or not. One other way to find out is to follow me on Twitter. It'll be in the description. I might have polls for specific videos coming up. So yeah, do that. Thank you again for being here with me. Hopefully we'll come back to this corner and discuss something next week. Bye.